Hey, welcome back to the channel. Look at my wife bought me a new toy and I broke it. I can't have nice things. That was dumb. That was dumb. Every tool's a hammer, unless it's a screwdriver, then it's a chisel.
We need a torch. Hate that nut.
We're not doing that. Because it ain't built till it's overbuilt. Don't force it. Get a bigger hammer. Every day's a school day. I've been thinking for years, would I use a side-by-side? Would I not use one? I don't, they're expensive. I don't want to waste a ton of money on one, have it just sit, whatever. So my wife bought me one for Father's Day. Pretty reasonable price, seemed to be pretty good shape, and then it blew up. Something bad's happened. I got to get into it, try to figure it out. I don't know. I don't know much about these, but it's got an engine. It's like any other engine. Must be, right? Sure. Got the little rig all decorated for Christmas and used it for our country Christmas. And it started making some noise, and I thought it sounded like it was the clutch. But then I was coming up the driveway one day and she just locked up. So it's not the clutch. I don't know what to think about it. I just got to start tearing stuff apart and see what I find, I guess. That's how you fix stuff, right? You just start tearing it apart. I'll start at the top, I'll work my way down. It does not look good, though, I can tell you that. All right, my first thoughts here was maybe I wadded up a timing chain. Valve hit the piston. Probably some cylinder head damage, something like that. But I pulled the valve cover off, and lo and behold, it appears all the valves, I can move all them by hand with the rocker arm. So it's not like it's locked up tight there, anyways. Not to say that couldn't be it. But then just for kicks, I said, let's pull the clutch cover off and just see what we see and check this out. We rotate. Ooh. We come to a stop. We go the other way. We come to a stop. That's not good. I think something catastrophic. I'm just gonna keep pulling parts off until I find the broken ones. Okay, got the head off. Everything looks okay except for the tip of the spark plug is broke, but I think we're getting closer to the problem. This piston is broke for sure, and that's what these pieces are. But then why is there pieces over here? I don't see anything broke, and the head was okay. Just got to keep taking off parts till we get to the root cause, I guess. Well, I found the source of the problem. That poor old girl was slapping that piston skirt for a long time. Like I said, I haven't owned this thing very long, and it made some noise. And I optimistically thought it was just the clutch, but wasn't. Good news is, rods aren't broke, crank's not broke. Hopefully, the bottom end can survive. I don't know. All right, I'm getting ahead of my video, I feel like, a bit, so I'm just going to stop and try to catch you up. In case you're in the same situation, if you found this video because you're trying to figure out how to fix your Polaris Ranger, we're into the scary zone now. Most people, they pull the plug long before this, and either send it to a shop or sell it or junk it or whatever. This machine is in really good shape, aside from, the catastrophic engine failure. And I think it's worth saving, and this doesn't scare me to get into stuff like this, but I wanted to just catch you up so that you know how to get to where I am, right? So when you pull you got to pull the whole throttle body comes off, leave the throttle cable on, you don't need to mess with that, unplug all the sensors, that whole thing comes off, flop it out of the way, unplug all the other stuff, flop it out of the way. the plugs are all different. You're not going to screw it up when you put it back together. You can't. They've made it that way for you. Pull the valve cover off. I didn't even unhook it from the vent hose. It's just hanging over there out of the way. I take apart as little as possible when I do this, because you never know if you go to take that thing off, it's stuck, you break something, whatever. Then you got to buy the hose or who knows. So I just don't mess with it. If it looks to be in good condition, don't mess with it. Get it out of your way and forget about it. Plus, if it's hanging there, you won't forget. But like if I disconnected the hose and tucked the hose out of the way, I may put the valve cover on and forget about the hose because it's just the way my brain doesn't work sometimes. Anyway, you get all that crap off. You pull what looks like the head bolts is actually holds the head and the jug down. And so at that point you can pull the head off, but the cylinder jug is bolted to this bracket. There's 2 bolts that are kind of a pain, but you got to come up through those slots in the floor down there. And you can get those 2 bolts out. Then you can lift the jug off. I don't have a fancy thing for doing the connecting rods. The wrist pins are held in with, they call them circlips. They're just a little C-ring. They don't have the ears like a snap ring. So you need something. I have this thing which is made for pulling cotter pins, but you can get it. There's a little notch in one spot, and you can get it into that little notch, and you can pop that circlip out. So I got the circlips out, but that one is stuck, which is no surprise because it's had a rough life. This one came out, the piston's over on the bench. To back up, I have no idea why there was a piece of something in this cylinder. This cylinder has no damage. Let me go over to the bench. Finally got my furnace working. It's freezing in here. So here's where those 2 bolts go, hold it to the frame, right? This cylinder, I mean, it's got some scoring, but it's not wrecked. This one, the chrome must be really good on these, because for the condition of that piston, I would have expected much worse cylinder liner condition, and that's really not bad. So there's no damage here. There's a little bit of damage on this head that looks kind of old. This is the side that had that one little piece sitting on top of the piston. I have no idea what that little piece was. I'm wondering if a piece from this side could have went through reversion, got into the intake, and then went into this cylinder. I don't know if that's possible. If you know about that stuff, comment down below, because I'm really curious how in the world we got a piece of aluminum in this bore when the piston has no damage. There's no bits of ring missing, ringland, nothing. There's nothing wrong with that piston, and yet there was a chunk of something over here. I think the only way it could be is somehow that chunk went out into the intake, through the intake port, came out into here, and then got sucked into here. Oh, is that possible? Probably not. Anyway, this is the bad cylinder. Obviously, the spark plug's been bashed by the chunks that were floating around in there. The chunks were the top land of the piston, and mysteriously, the second ring is completely gone. I have no idea. I haven't seen any pieces that look like piston ring. They're probably in the bottom. I don't know how they got out because the fracture doesn't go into that groove. This is a big mystery. Hey, and it's always possible somebody's already been in here, and people do incredibly stupid things. They may have lost or broke the ring and put it together without it, for all I know. So I don't worry too much about it. You just press on, right? I know I need a piston and rings. There's no question about that. So I got to get this. I briefly considered leaving. If I can get this piston off, I briefly considered just quitting, putting new pistons on, new cylinder liner. I'll recondition that head myself. But I talked myself out of it because there has got to be so much garbage down in that crankcase. I'll never be comfortable that I've flushed it all out. You know what I mean? Pieces of piston, that ring is completely gone. Maybe that's in there, maybe it's not. But there's got to be a lot of crap. Let me back up a bit further to when I bought this thing, right? Because I bought this in, let's see, now it's January. I bought this in October. And when I bought it, it was very cold-blooded. I had this issue where when you start it, when it's cold, it ran pretty crappy until it was warmed up. And it was a little bit noisy. In the, kind of the bottom end. And like I said, I was blaming the clutch. I really thought it sounded like just a rattly clutch. They have a sound to them, and that's kind of what it sounded like to me. I guess I was being optimistic because when I bought it, I heard the noise. I pulled the dipstick. The oil it needed an oil change, and yet there were no metal filings in it. And I said, well, it can't be something like this because that metal, the noise couldn't be something super serious because it would be full of metal. If it had fresh motor oil in it, I probably would have questioned it because I'd have been like, well, this guy changed the oil just to sell this to me. But it wasn't. It was dirty motor oil with no filings in it, at least none that came out on the dipstick, right? So, I don't know. This obviously has been going on a long, long time. I don't know how there wasn't filings in the oil. They can't have been stuck to a magnet on the drain plug because most of it's aluminum. It wouldn't stick to a magnet anyway. So, I don't get that, but it doesn't really matter. The noise got worse very quickly. I drove it like 3 times and noticed each time the noise was successively worse. The last time I got on to drive it home and it ran very poorly, and then it seized up in the driveway before I even got up here. So that's the story of how this kind of came to be. This obviously is something that's been going on a long time. I did find out after I bought it that just by pure coincidence, that used to belong to somebody I know, that this machine was rolled over, and the story I heard was that it was left running like on its roof or on its side or whatever. So maybe that's when it started. Maybe that I don't know. Could that start the damage? And then it keeps getting worse. I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, this is where we are. It doesn't matter where we want to be or think we should be, right? This is where we are. So I think that brings you up to speed, like as far as if you're taking this project on, just so you know what you're getting yourself into. I think at this point, you could pull the drain plug, flush, half a dozen cans of brake clean through this thing and put it back together. I think there's a chance that would be okay, but I don't think it's wise. I'm going to pull it. I'm going to split the case. I got a buddy that has done a lot of work on these power sports stuff. He should be able to tell me if the crank is okay, the connecting rod, because the crank, I think, presses together. It looks like I don't think you can unbolt the rods. So that's a major thing. If the rod bearings are bad or if the rods are bent, you pretty much got to buy a crank assembly. So I'm just gonna get it out, get it apart, get some advice from him, get some parts on order, and I'm just gonna fix it the right way so that it should last, until this chassis is shot. So my next order of business is to get that primary clutch off, and that's no small task. You got to have a puller. I've never worked on one. You got to have a special puller, which I borrowed this one from my neighbor. These are not expensive. You can buy one. Of course, the cheap ones are probably garbage, but I really only need it to work one time. Anyways, the problem is you got to mail order them, and I never plan ahead, right? I want to do this today, and I needed one. So I did borrow this one from my neighbor. Unfortunately, the threads are wrong. I got to see if I have a tap, because this is what the threads are. This thread's in here. Pardon my grunting in the microphone. So I could, in theory, I could drill a hole. I think I got a shorter bolt. I could drill a hole through here, tap it with these threads, and this would work okay. So yeah, that's, I guess the first thing I got to do is figure out how to get that thing off of there. And I'm not making this up. I've never been into one of these before. I mean, I'm a handy, like, I understand engines in that, and I get that some people just don't, and this is super scary, but I would encourage you to, don't be afraid. If you got a place you can tear it apart, first thing, make sure you can afford the project, because you don't want to tear it all apart and then just have it sit there. That's just annoying, right? But don't be afraid to tear into things. It's all just nuts and bolts, right? You can always, you look on YouTube, somebody will tell you all the details of this, which my video won't. My video is going to be very basic, but I'm sure there's people that will go into finite detail of how to clean the gasket off and how to, every little thing. So the info is out there. Just don't be afraid to work on your stuff if it's something you want to do, Little advice from a guy that doesn't know what he's doing: make sure you leave the engine bolted in until you have this primary clutch off. In fact, I may wish I left the cylinder on there and bolted. Probably if you know you're pulling the engine, which I didn't really know for sure that I was pulling the engine, but if you do know for sure that the engine's coming out, probably want to pull that primary first while everything's bolted solid, because I got a feeling I might be in for a fight getting this off here. I don't know for sure. I think my advice would be pull the primary, pull the secondary, pull that back cover, get all that stuff out of your way while the engine is bolted nice and solid. Okay, that's that. Hindsight 2020. I may really regret, and I may have to put that back together a little bit in order to get this up. We'll see. No sense worrying about it. I just thought I would mention it to you. Okay, this is the tool I borrowed from my neighbor, and everything looks fine except for this thread is not right. I need this thread. The Polaris Ranger apparently has 3/4 16 threads, and this was, I think, a Polaris four-wheeler, and it has like a 14 millimeter kind of a coarse thread. So I thought, well, I can make it work. I'll just drill the bolt out and run a tap through, and then thread this onto here, and it basically gives me the same thing, right? Well, I don't have the right tap. I have a 14 millimeter fine. That's a spark plug tap for some things, but this is a coarser version. So I do have another guy who says he has the tool, and he says his is 3/4 16 thread. So I'm just gonna go borrow that tool also, rather than go chase after a tap that I may not find anywhere locally. So stand by. Okay, I've borrowed another tool. It has the right threads. I hope this is the one. I don't know. We're just gonna try it and see. It looks like it ought to work. Yeah, that was actually pretty painless. Not bad at all. Now it's on to just more tearing apart of things. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep pretending I know what I'm doing there until I get the engine out laying on my bench. Okay, it's going okay. It's out, it's on the bench. Time to just start ripping it apart. I'm gonna keep track of where the lifters, the push rods, where they were, because I think they probably should go back in the same spot, but other than that, it's just a tear apart fest. I just pulled the filter and drained the oil and just wanted to stop. I pulled it off, but there was a big blob of silicone oozing out of one of these joints. over here. If there's some more. That's a pretty much sure sign that somebody's had this engine apart already. So it makes me more confident this probably was a long-term issue, and maybe they cobbled it together just to sell it or what, I don't know. But anyways, that's a thing to look for. Actually, to look for, you couldn't see this in the machine, you know, when I looked at it, but if you did see any silicone that was oozing out of the gap around the cases on these, that's a sure thing, because the factory made them super neat and tidy. You might get a little like this, you know, if you can see that, but you won't have like big hanging strings out like we had over here. So I got a feeling this ain't the first time she's been apart. Let's keep digging. Pro tip, not sure I'm qualified to give these, but this water pump impeller has to come off before that cover that I just took off will come, because this shaft has to come out of the hole in that cover. Anyway, thought I'd mention it. Also, not important right now, I just did it to show you because I'll forget to do it later. You have to rotate the crank until you get timing marks lined up here and timing marks lined up here. Like I say, it's not important now. I do like to take them apart when they're in the right orientation, but when you go to put it together, you got to get this right. Found the rest of my pistons. I had a lot of pieces in there. This is a baffle, some sort, an oil baffle that goes in here. And it did an amazing job of keeping those pieces over in here. I don't know if it's part of its job or not, but it did it. There are some floating over here, but not many. Yeah, all these are chunks, a lot of chunks. This little cavity here is full of them. And then this guy here is the oil pickup, and it's plugged right full, right solid, plugged full of stuff. Pieces of the rest of the engine. So I'm guessing that maybe she, you know, it was bad, obviously, and this thing slowly got more and more plugged, and then at some point this plugged enough that it wasn't getting oil, and that's when she really spiraled downward. Anyway, yeah, you know, I don't know much about it, but I don't see any problems with the cases. I gotta get them cleaned up. I got a friend that I think can tell me if this crank is good, if the rods are straight and all that kind of crap. Hoping that assembly's all okay, put new seals on it and let her rip. If that's the case, we'll get new bearings and get it cleaned up and start putting it back together. All right, well, we have updates. Not the best news. See all this? I believe is all junk. I took the parts out to my buddy Joey's, and he put them in his hot tank pressure washer, ran them through several times. They came pretty clean, which revealed a lot more damage. Camshaft, junk. Cylinders, I already knew, junk. Cylinder head could be rebuilt for sure, but it is seriously messed up. Crankshaft assembly, junk. Well, it has at least one of the rods is bent, possibly both. The thing is, you have to press those apart and replace the parts and press them back together, which takes a whole bunch of special equipment. And apparently the people that do that don't do Polaris anymore. So that's a bad sign right there. And actually, even the cases, which I thought were fine, they're okay. I would use them if everything else was okay, but this engine has blown up at least once before, and through both rods, because there's evidence in the case of both connecting rods hitting the case, and this time the piston stayed intact, essentially, and the rod stayed intact, although bent, probably bent from before when they hit the thing. I got a feeling what happened is somebody blew it up, pulled the jug off, threw 2 new pistons on it, threw it back together. There was way more metal in the engine than what you'd get from the damage to my one piston. Like if you took all those pieces, you probably could build a whole nother piston. So it definitely had a massive problem. Likely they put new piston on a bent rod, and that's part of the reason it just didn't live again. So I'm not going to do that. I did have the thought of just do that thing again and put it together and sell it, but I can't do that to somebody. You know, it's just, it ain't right. So I guess what I'm going to do right now is heave all this crap in a box, throw it in the back of the Ranger, and shove it in my shed because I don't have the money. You can buy a reman engine for $3,000 or $4,000 with a warranty and all that stuff. Found a couple places that seem reputable and have good ratings and all that thing, good reviews, right? That's how we judge it nowadays. But I gotta wait and see how the money tree grows this spring, because I just don't have the resources at the moment to do that. But I'm pretty sure this thing is not. I mean, anything's fixable, right? Like I said, the cases are damaged, but they're reusable. I can buy a new jug. I can fix the head myself, buy a crank assembly, all that. But by the time you spend that money, you've almost paid for a reman engine. So it's kind of stupid to do it when you could have a new engine, which presumably, well, not new, but rebuilt engine, which presumably has all the parts thoroughly inspected and you know, replaced if they need to be. So that's where we're at. This project is now on the back burner officially. So I got to just gather up these parts in a box and get it out of here. I got to try to free up my shop. For Pete's sake, you can't even walk in here. My buddy Merritt is on his way over actually with a air compressor he's given me, which is awesome because mine has completely died now. And I can't even get it in the door. So got some work to do. Gotta get tidied up. I gotta put this thing out of my mind because it makes me sick. I just bought the thing not long ago and it was quite cheap. So I didn't, you know, financially is okay. I didn't get hurt too bad, but now I gotta spend the rest of the money that I saved when I bought it to get the thing up and running. And I kind of missed my little buggy. I really liked having it. It was quite handy. But that's the way life goes, right? We'll get back to this when the money tree crop comes on and I get a couple bushels of hundreds picked. As things progress, I'll try to bring you along. I thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Make sure you have clicked subscribe. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Lady Luck got me again.